Hey guys, King of Charles here to be a judge your journey ass, and today I bring to you my top 5 teams for the Fighting Cup Remix. Next up, in the literally tomorrow, Fighting Cup Remix is coming, and it is this is such a lazy instead of doing brand new cups, they literally are recycling cups and just putting remix in front of it. It's so lazy. And if you don't like it, I'm right there with you for the fact that this is incredibly lazy. This is a super lazy way to do it. But before we get started with my top 5 teams for the Fighting Cup Remix, this is going to be my therapist mental health tip of the day. And it's going to be about resiliency. As usual, you could skip this by going straight to the chapters. But since we're talking about fighting, emotional resiliency. Being emotionally resilient is very important. For example, remember I told you about that head coach thing I was talking about? Well, guess what? I'm probably going to be promoted. Well, I'm going to be head coach, but actual co-head coach of the wrestling team. So I got promoted. I'm excited. And yes, I'm good. But there's going to be a lot of turmoil that's going to come with that. And that's really great because I'm very resilient emotionally and physically. Because of all the things I've been through the military and just building it through my awareness, being a mental health therapist, and doing the tools I need to help continue to build my resilience. So when you're a therapist, you should be pretty good at building resilience because you are literally in the thick of mental health and you have a lot of tools at your disposal. So emotional resilience is different from tumbling out. Instead, it's a quality that allows you to maintain an even keel in your darkest times, even while acknowledging difficult circumstances. So the traits of emotionally resilient people are those that are optimistic, emotionally intelligent, they're competent, self-aware, they're empathetic, self-assured, and effective communicator, and they're open to new experience and possibilities. They're patient and they're comfortable with uncertainty and composed. So if you are able to be all of these in situations, then yes, you are very emotionally resilient. There's 6 tips for building emotional resiliency in this article. Definitely take a look. Again, this is from Psych Central. Psych Central is beautiful because it's reviewed by licensed mental health professionals or people that are individuals that specialize in their field. So definitely take a look at this, and there's a lot of great tips, especially for emotional resilience. I wish I could send this to everyone in the military because this is a must article for those that serve in the military because emotional resilience is so important for you to do your duties and for you to overcome obstacles because military careers are incredibly stressful as well with a lot of other professions. Without further ado, it's my top 5 teams for the the Fighting Cup Remix. This is going to screw me up. Why are we putting remix in front of everything? Like I said, it's lazy and I don't like it, but you know what? Here we are. And without further ado, let's get started. Alright, first off, we have his Swain, Sneasel, Machamp, and Sirfetch'd to close out. Machamp is going to be your safe switch. His Swain Sneasel is still really good in this cup with the exception of 2 things. 1 Thorough and 2 Toxicroak. Not a lot of things in the Fighting Cup are going to have bulk. If you're trying to get an A for bulk score, this is not the cup for you. Otherwise, pretty great grades across the board. I already mentioned Toxicroak being your big problem. However, it's actually not that bad. And what I mean by that is that when you have his Swain Sneasel versus Toxicroak, yes, Toxicroak wins, but here's what happens. Toxicroak only lives with 21 HP left. They have to expend both of their shields. And you can send in Machamp or Sirfetch'd to farm it down to get energy advantage for whatever's in the back. Ideally, what you'd like to do in this scenario is that after you break, but if they decide to stay in and you get to farm down their Toxicroak, you can send in Sirfetch'd, farm it down, and have possibly enough energy to Brave Bird to make it to a Brave Bird for whatever's in the back. So gives you Burb, you get to farm down for Burb energy, Burb wipes out whatever's in the back, and Machamp, you can switch in the Machamp right away to close out. So very much a shield breaker strat, even though, like I mentioned, this team, your lead lose against host, it's not that bad. Very simple strategy. You lose the lead with Sneasel, you safe switch in the Machamp, and then you close out with 2 Swain, Sneasel, or Sirfetch'd. Or like I mentioned, if you do see Toxicroak, like I mentioned, what you can do is you can go ahead and farm it down after you give up with Swain Sneasel. So sack with Swain Sneasel in the lead, send in Sirfetch'd to farm down, get Burb energy, blow your opponent whatever is coming in with a Burb because it's definitely going to one-shot, and then you can send in Machamp. What happens here is whatever you have with the lead, whatever Hisuian Sneasel lose against, even though it says over here in the 2 shield, it can and will win. As you see here, you can win, just literally, you can beat Machamp, literally just poison jabbing it down. And then you can have 100 energy for whatever's in the back and break 2 shields. So there's a lot of play you can have here with this team, which is why it has a low threat score of 328. Next up, we have Galarian Farfetch'd as your lead, Toxicroak as your safe switch, and Throw to close out. So Farfetch'd, it's number 1 in the lead for a reason, because it's going to break a crap ton of shields. A lot of shields, in fact. And then the reason you have Toxicroak is going to be your safe switch, and Throw is literally just there to catch Toxicroak's safe switches. Toxicroak is going to be a very popular safe switch for this meta, and a lot of people are going to create strategies to where you'll force out Throws, or you'll use Toxicroak to draw something out. In this case, we're literally just going to have Toxicroak. We're going to throw Throw into Toxicroak and blast it down to death. Amazing coverage. D for bulk just because of Throw. Throw is probably the bulkiest mon in this meta. Probably. There probably is another one, but you know what? I'm only focusing on what's going to make you work for this cup. And there's not a lot of things that are going to work for this cup. Pretty safe and consistent. As you see here, this is pretty much a kill Toxicroak team. Well, not really kill Toxicroak in a sense, but in the 2 shield, Toxicroak actually beats Galarian Farfetch'd. So this is why you need to swap out. So G Farfetch'd does not have a great matchup against a Toxicroak, and you don't want to go straight Brave Bird, because all you're going to do is break 1 shield. You're going to go 1 shield, then Toxicroak still has full of HP, and you give it energy advantage. So if you get a Toxicroak lead, you're going to safe switch into your own Toxicroak. Yeah, you're going to have an energy disadvantage, but at the same time, you can send in Throw to close out, and then Galarian Farfetch'd can hopefully Brave Bird its way to victory in the back row. Very generic team. Pretty high on the threat score spectrum, but this is just if you really like Galarian Farfetch'd, this one's for you. Yes, it's the number 1 lead, but in all honesty, there's a lot of things that could beat it in the lead as well. So as far as like popular combinations, meta, etc., there's gonna be a lot that can beat it. So just keep that in mind if you decide to use this team or Galarian Farfetch'd in general. Pretty cookie cutter team, like I mentioned to you. You lose the lead with Galarian Farfetch'd, you safe switch into Toxicroak and G-Fetch'd, and hopefully Throw can close out in the back with shields. Next, we have Shadow Poliwrath, Toxicroak, and Farfetch'd. Shadow Poliwrath is the second best lead in this cup. It's able to beat all of the poison types, as in Toxicroak, as well as Hisuian Sneasel, just by the virtue of Scald, Ice Punch power, and Mud Shots do add up, especially against glass cannons. Toxicroak is your safe switch, Farfetch'd closes out with a burp for the victory. As you see, not a lot of bulk. Not going to bulk. This is a very big shield breaker strat. You're going to break the crap out of your opponent's shields, and you're going to close out with 2 powerful chargers either way. So this is what makes Shadow Poliwrath really good. You will beat Toxicroak, but barely. As you see here, you'll literally live with like 1 HP. But 2 turns have to flip the difference. As you see, you're going to go straight Ice Punch. But you will win alignments, and the really good thing about this matchup in particular is that you're only going to give your opponent a little bit of an energy advantage. So whatever comes in is going to only have 1. You get to keep alignment though, and then you can send in whatever you want. You can have Machamp, or you could have Farfetch'd and Toxicroak lined up with a proper Mon. So likely it's going to be Farfetch'd, because with Farfetch'd you can likely just Brave Bird whatever's in front of you for the victory. Unless it outpaces you like Shadow Machamp or something of that sort. As you see here, low threat score 366. If you lose the lead, as you see, Galarian Farfetch'd can give you a problem in the 2 shield with Shadow Poliwrath, just because of Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade is very dangerous against water types, which is why you're going to switch out into Toxicroak if you see a Galarian Farfetch'd running in front of you. As well as Machamp. In the 2 shield, Machamp takes you out. You can do a farm down strat, like I mentioned. You could just sack Poliwrath in the lead if your opponent decides not to give up switch, and then you can send in Galarian Farfetch'd to farm down and Brave Bird in the back. So not Galarian Farfetch'd to farm down and then Brave Bird your opponent's back row. A lot of Brave Birds are going to fly during this cup, either by Farfetch'd or Galarian Farfetch'd. And not Galarian Farfetch'd. Sheesh, if there's a G Farfetch'd, that's the 3rd evolution you don't ever want to see, because it's probably really good and really powerful, but Farfetch'd. Low threat score, like I mentioned, this gives you a better chance against Toxicroak, and this team does give you the ability to farm down with Farfetch'd if you want to sack Shadow Poliwrath in a lead, and then you can burb your opponent to death, and Toxicroak is just that extra thing in the back. Next up, we got Sirfetch'd, Machamp, and Toxicroak. Literally just double safe switch. It's nothing super fancy. Well, I like double safe switch teams just because you have a lot of safety. That makes perfect sense, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, I have to. Of course, you're gonna be safe with two safe switches. This uses Sirfetch'd in the lead because Sirfetch'd can still break shields. You could also replace Sirfetch'd with Galarian Farfetch'd if you want to, but honestly, you probably have the Sirfetch'd built. Machamp or Toxicroak can be your safe switch in this area, so either one will work. And then as you see, excellent safety, amazing coverage. This team has a really, really low threat score. As you see, the only problem it's going to give you is Toxicroak. And you could safe switch in Machamp and Toxicroak. You have a pretty good lineup for your back row. Now, here's what makes it interesting. You could double Leaf Blade if your opponent wants to take both of their shield. Like, you could take both of your opponent's shields in this instance. But the thing about it is your opponent doesn't have to shield that. So if you do Toxicroak versus Sirfetch'd, in the one shield, as you see, one Leaf Blade will do 46 damage, which is still a lot. So your opponent, you can double up on Leaf Blade and then attack your opponent. What happens here in the 2 shield is that against Toxicroak is your opponent has to break both of their shields. You still have a shield left for your opponent. So your opponent's going to have enough energy for a Mud Bomb, but you could still have a shield left. The problem is Toxicroak does resist counters from both of your back rows, so it's probably your best interest to just safe switch out. Or if you want, you could try this Sack Lead Stretch, but if you look at your back row, for this team, if you try to counter down with either Toxicroak or Machamp in the zeros, one counter does 7 damage, or does only 6 damage. So they're gonna get another Mud Bomb onto whatever Mon comes in. Unless you send in Machamp and then you could force CMP, but at the same time, you're gonna lose alignment and Machamp will get hurt because of it. So as you see, Machamp versus Toxicroak, if we head to the zeros, Machamp does 9 damage per, and it's going to go ahead. You're going to get to a close combat or cross chop, but it's like I mentioned, the Sack Lead strat's very iffy. Just because you'll be able to cross chop them to death, but it really just depends. If you lag in any instance, this isn't going to work. So you could sack Sirfetch'd in the lead, you could break both your opponent's shields, send in Machamp, shield the Mud Bomb that comes in, cross chop the Toxicroak to death, but you're going to have a Machamp that's damaged, and Machamp and Toxicroak are going to have to try and close out, and you lose alignment. So it's a very risky strategy. Better yet, if you do lose the lead with Sirfetch'd, the best bet is to probably just safe switch into top Machamp, and then have Toxicroak and Sirfetch'd close out with shields, or with whatever's left with energy, etc. after you swap out. With that being said, this team has the lowest threat score. It really does. You can go ahead and swap it out to where Toxicroak's in the lead and Sirfetch'd is in the back if you feel more comfortable with that, but this team comp in general has the smallest threat score, the lowest one. Literally the only thing that gives you a huge problem is probably going to be Toxicroak, which is going to be on everywhere, but I gave you ways to beat out around Toxicroak, and it's really not that hard to beat. If you're watching my video, you probably have played Toxicroak, fought Toxicroak a lot already, so you have a good idea, or a similar idea if you play the last Fighting Cup of what to do against Toxicroak. And last but not least, we have Shadow Poliwrath, Toxicroak, and Hisuian Sneasel. This is ABB. The reason we have Poliwrath in here is to get rid of Toxicroak, because Toxicroak is probably going to be your biggest problem for your back row. Along with that, Sirfetch'd can give you a little bit of a hard time, actually a lot. If you see in the lead with Shadow Poliwrath, you already saw this sim with the last team. You have to switch out into Toxicroak and then Hisuian Sneasel. Your opponent can't switch the Toxicroak into your Toxicroak. If they get their Thoreau, you can send in Shadow Poliwrath, as you see here. So if you send in Thoreau versus Shadow Poliwrath isn't actually a terrible matchup, just because Thoreau is it's super slow and Body Slam's, yeah, it's super slow with Zen Headbutt, and you don't get stabbed. You can also debuff it with Scald if you can, so if you lose the lead, safe switch into Toxicroak. If Thoreau farms you down, you can send in Poliwrath. So Thoreau versus Toxicroak isn't even a bad match to begin with, because you could fire Sludge Bomb, and if they eat it, it does a ton of damage. For those of you who have already played this cup, you probably already know what I'm talking about, and you've probably already fought a lot of Thoreaus with Toxicroak anyways. You lose with Shadow Poliwrath, you send in Toxicroak as your safe switch, and then Hisuian Sneasel and Shadow Poliwrath closes out. If your opponent does not, your opponent's probably going to have one counter to Toxicroak, but if you could take out their Toxicroak, which would be the counter your back row, guess what? your back row is very strong against a lot of the Fighting Cup remix, unless it's a Throw in the back. In other words, they beat your lead like it's G Surfetched, and then they have a Throw in the back. Then you're like, oh great, this is awesome. But actually, G Surfetched, as you see here, isn't bad. So if you look at the Sim versus G Surfetch, etc., it loses the 2 shield. It'll lose the 2 shield, and it barely wins the 1 shield. So you still have a lot of win conditions even if you lose the lead. But like I said, this is just an ABB variation. And speaking of ABB, and since we're speaking of Poison and Toxic, it has a threat score of 420. Absolutely perfect for the shoutcast, and a very, very good number, especially since you're using double poison. So, happy 420. If this is, it's just an ABB team, and like I mentioned, but it's actually very good if your opponent has a Toxic in a lead, and they don't have if that's their only counter to other poisons, as in Toxic, or you get the Throw, guess what? Your back row is going to have a lot of fun against the rest of the Fighting Cup remix meta. And that's game. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. As you see, there's going to be a lot of, yeah. A lot of these cups are very boring. The Electric Cup is probably the only thing new in the Hoenn Cup, but you probably saw those cups coming with the exception of the Electric Cup. And yeah, that's what we're doing, the same exact thing over and over again. And that's how lazy Niantic is. Hey, you know what? If they want PvP to fail competitively, I mean, and they want esports to stay the way it is, you know, let them. Let's be an F tier esport. Let's not be able to draw in 10K or more viewers unless we have a code in our chat that literally wants people to come just so they could get that code. That's literally the only reason why people were watching. Give me my code, give me my code, give me my code, give me my code. That's like, yeah, that's basically it. And yeah, but this is what we're with, and if you really want that Steven pose, guess what? We're gonna have to fire away the legend. So hopefully these teams do help you out. What I'm trying to say here is that I won't be streaming for the foreseeable future because I'm I'm head coach of wrestling, and it's really hard to fit in streaming in general right now with the way my schedule is lined up. So I'll figure something out, but in all honesty, I'd rather take that time to do other things or work on Scarlet and Violet content. Because I haven't released a Scarlet Violet video, I really like doing it. Regardless of views I get, I just really enjoy making content and playing Scarlet and Violet as well. So look out for that, look out for that. Really do hope you guys are doing well in Season 13, and hopefully these teams do help you out, especially if you played Fighting Cup from before on the last season. Good luck on Yoga Valley sets. Do me a huge favor, like, subscribe, and comment for the YouTube algorithm, and I will see y'all on the next video.
That I made